Hey guys, welcome back to the Diaries podcast.
Hey guys, today I'm joined by Shayan, the founder and CEO of Milkshake Studios. This is a man who named his company at the age of 15 before he started it 6 or 6.5 years later. Lovely having you here.
Thank you so much. The one thing that I do know about is branding and production because those things they have spoken to me since I was a kid. I've seen this firsthand that I'm unable to explain to a client of mine why something did not work out. The landscape over here, especially in this country and especially in Dubai, is so competitive that almost every company will be offering you every kind of service.
You had one particular ad.
Yeah, so what I was mentioning was that realizing that a good asset is something that will always get you results. It's a very old business principle. One ad that we made and we invested a lot of money into. It's 6 months old, and every time I run a campaign on that, I still get results. I still get brands who want to work with me for that. Compare that to, let's say, what do you call it? Me trying to go viral by being silly online,
Mm.
right? It took me a while, but then I realized that yeah, that's not the footprint that I want to leave. I think my footprint should be something that's true and honest to me, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Interesting. I really like that, and I think that sets you apart from what you typically
I'm
find here.
trying. I'm trying to set myself apart,
So
but
set the competitive landscape for me, because when I look at this, I don't have a lot of understanding of what you do in the media space. So if you were to set the competitive landscape, who are doing the same things you do are like direct competitors, and then who's an indirect competitor that does similar things and maybe more or less than what you do in Dubai, let's say.
I think, to be honest with you, if you think about our landscape, you'll find similarities in a lot of companies, to be
Mhm.
honest. Okay. There's a company that, the sort of company that we're striving to be is a proper production company. Okay.
Okay.
And that production, like in my mind, a company that comes to my head is this company called Singularity.
Okay.
Okay. They are producing these top of the line commercials. Okay. And the reason why we want to be like that is because we have the same passion for storytelling and filmmaking. When you think about media, right, uh, the landscape over here, especially in this country and especially in Dubai, is so competitive that almost every company will be offering you every kind of service,
Mm.
right? uh, and I have made this mistake earlier. Actually, the first 2 years was, just me learning. Okay, like the sort of company that I want to be, and I thought that maybe success would come by offering all kind of services to my clients. But then, you know, it's something that my dad said that nothing that you have control over is worth doing. You know, and I think that resonates with me a lot today, because if I don't have control over how a performance marketing company works, right, I don't think it's worth it for me. If I don't have control over how let's say a company that does PR works, I don't have control over that because I don't know about that. Okay. The one thing that I do know about is branding and production, because those things they have spoken to me since I was a kid. Okay. I know what a good design is. I know what a good video looks like. I know what good storytelling is. And specializing in just that is something that I realize is the right way to go. Because when I see a company today in media that is offering all kinds of services, right, I run away from that, because I know that there comes a point in a company, no matter how big a team, right, that it all just comes down crashing and it just burns out. Okay. There are companies that are doing that in a very successful manner, maybe. I think, and something that I think is uh, the right approach is by specializing. So if I'm specializing in only two things and I'm providing only two things, I'm able to charge a higher ticket price for just those two things.
Mhm.
Because every time like I get a referral from someone, from a client of mine towards someone else, right? That, like, for example, let's say if you want an ad or a proper commercial made, these are the right people to approach. That's it. I don't think I need to be sold on like anything else apart from what I specialize in. And I think that's how, it's been working out for us. Because to be honest, our space is also a space where, because it's so competitive, uh, you want to make sure that the person that you're working with, right, is someone that you trust.
Mhm.
And the main reason for that is because, almost everyone is in a marketing field right now.
So I'm gonna dissect that a little bit. You said first that production has spoken to you since you were a child.
Yeah.
Was there a particular incident or a particular anecdote that you look back at and say, that's kind of where maybe I didn't know that I decided, but that's what ignited the spark for production?
It's hard to say, to be honest. I think, you know, wanting to tell stories is what really mattered to me, And I think, being exposed to write stories was, I think, what mattered a lot. I was very young when I watched this Irani movie called A Separation. Okay.
It's on my watch list.
Okay, you should definitely watch it. And I think, when I watched it as a very young kid, and the movie spoke to me, and I understood like how difficult something like that is, and I knew the meaning behind that, and I understood the fact that I think like the best kind of stories are stories that leave you with something, you
Mhm.
know or like, they evoke an emotion in you. My granddad was suffering the same way a character in this movie was suffering, and I think that was one of the reasons why I connected with the movie, and I realized that the stories that I want to tell are not stories which are superficial, but stories which are just real about about us and about my friends, about my family, and about the surroundings. And that's how I also named the company, actually. I was thinking about like how is it possible that I want to make a company or a production house which tells very human, very real stories, right? And the name should resonate that. And I was like 15 when I came up with the name for Milkshake. And my idea was that inherently we're all the same, right? We have the same kind of limbs. We have the functionalities of a human, and I think that is the element that milk has in all kinds of milk, right? The same color remains, right? Like it might be off white or shades might change. It's just shades of white, right? But what makes us different is the way that we think and the way that we feel, and that's what flavors resonate. So when you mix a flavor with milk, it becomes a milkshake. And I thought that if I'm gonna make a company, it has to be about stories which I think are important to tell. Stories which I think are real, and I think that's where this whole thing came to be.
It's very interesting. Also interesting that you had the name for the company ready at 15.
Yeah, I did. It's crazy because my senior year jackets, right, did not have my name. They had Milkshake Studios written on them.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I was envisioning this, like, this has to be like a thing, and I think just years down the line, it just worked out.
Mashallah. Wow. So then, what was that gap? You did your. I saw you did your ACCA. You worked as an accountant somewhere.
Yeah, I did.
If
I
you
did.
knew that this was your path, I mean, you didn't go to traditional university. You did ACCA, which means you did all of the 12
Yeah.
papers, right? 12 papers. It is important to have that formal education and to get to rubber stamp yourself in some field. But was
Yeah.
that a diversion? Was that an interest that You itched.
Actually, it was not an interest. My dad is an auditor. He has
Mm.
his own accounting company, and they've been doing their thing for, like, let's say, the last 15 years. Okay. The difference here was that, obviously, like, so I come from a Pakistani background. It's not exactly very easy to convince your parents that, I want to pursue film. Okay.
Mm.
And one of the things that I was looking at was that some of my favorite filmmakers did not have to go to film school, you know.
Mm.
And I think I realized it very early on that, if you want to tell a story, right, you don't have to go to film school to learn creativity. I think to tell a story, you just need to live life. Okay, you need to go through experiences. Um, and I think doing ACCA for me was, it was not my interest, obviously, but obviously, like, it was one of those things that I just had to do it. And I was actually very good in accounts, uh, in school and during ACCA. Like, I was so good that I was teaching the teachers at some point as well. You know,
Where
yeah,
did you go to learn?
I was studying on my own, actually.
Okay.
So I think the last few papers for ACCA as well, I kind of decided that, I'm going to do them on my own without, like, formally getting, like, tuitions or something. And I think that's what helped me. Uh, that was like a plan B for me, if this never worked out. But this had to work. Like, no matter what, it had to work, because even while I was doing ACCA, I was still working in this media company on the side. Okay. And when I finished that, I was, working as an accountant. And the main reason to work as an accountant was because I was good at it. But for me, it was a means to, get investment or get earnings for my equipment, or to make enough money to buy the right sort of laptops, right sort of computers, right sort of, like, cameras and mics and everything. When I felt like, it was good enough, like, I have achieved, like I found a way to, like, get what I need to get in order to start my own thing. Around that time is when I decided that, I'm gonna, like, burn this boat and I'm not gonna look back. And that's when Milkshake started.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
No, really, that is amazing. A lot of people speak about their dreams, and very rarely do you see people that pursue them and make actionable plans to get there. Um, so let's say you've been able to gather all the equipment you need, right? You go in, you hand in your resignation letter, and you say, "I'm out. I'm done." What's step one? What do you do on day one?
Step one, I mean, honestly, for anyone who would be wanting to start their own company, right? Uh, there were certain mistakes that I made. Okay. First of all, which were that, you need to know what your plan should be, right? Or you need to know what it is that you're going to do, because it's not just as simple as, like, you decide that, I'm going to start a company, and that's it. Like, success is just going to follow. Step one was discipline. And as stupid as that sounds, right, as cliche as that sounds, it is super important. Discipline means that, when I started, I didn't have a client, but I know, like, the sort of clients that I'm going to look for, or the sort of clients that I need, which meant that even though now no one is a boss of me, right? No one's going to tell me that, hey, dude, you have to wake up at this
Mhm.
time, or, you have to, submit these reports by tomorrow or something. It just meant that, okay, wake up at 8, right? Uh, have proper sleep, and then just get to work up until 7 p.m. And what that meant was going door to door, because, you know sending your CVs or sending an email wasn't enough. It was, like, my whole approach was that, you know to any person who I'm trying to, like, sell my services to, right, they need to see me, they need to see the passion that I have. uh, and then, maybe they'd want to work. And that's what happened. But I don't think, like, that's something that we do today, by the way.
Why not?
Because I think, like, today we have a word of mouth spread out for us already. So everyone who kind of like works with us already knows a lot about us, you know, or they heard of about us through like a very trustable reference for them. uh, as I was mentioning earlier, that trust is super important, because everyone is doing what we probably are doing, okay, but it's not the same thing, you know. Trust just doesn't mean that, okay, someone's going to shoot a good video or something. Trust means how well can a person handle something with care, you know. uh, and that doesn't just mean that, okay, you're a nice person to your clients. It just means that uh, your experience translates everything about you as a person. So for example, if I'm working with a company, right, I think having worked for 10 years into like my thing, right, I know exactly what that company needs now. Trust means that the moment that they're speaking to me, and whatever I'm pitching to them, right, it's not the same thing that is being pitched by a different company to them.
Mhm.
It just means that I'm looking at them and I genuinely see that, okay, you know what, maybe I can help this person, you know. And I think for Milkshake, the biggest thing is that the reason that I still, even though we are a group of six, I still very much closely work into production, is because that trust is the Shayan quality, basically, you know.
That trust is handed to you.
Yes. And even though we have videographers who do the work, right, it's not the same thing, because and the reason it's not the same thing is because, you know, the right way to explain this is that, for example, my teammates, right, they would be Jesse Pinkman, okay, their
Mhm.
product is as good as, Walter White's product, okay.
Mhm.
But Walter White still considers that, his product is the best. You can't beat it, right? So it's that Walter White and Jesse Pinkman sort of thing. Uh, and I think for me, even though like my teammates, they do like a great job, right? I still think that, I want to make sure that when it's handed out, right, it comes across as that stamp of quality. And I think that's what I'm trying to achieve at Milkshake. That, everything that our team hands out, right, it is that stamp of quality.
I think that's very fair. I mean, you see that with any small business that is on the path to being more established, more successful, and more
Yeah.
sustainable in the long run.
Yes.
They pay really, really strong attention to the kind of quality they hand back to their
Yeah.
clients. But even, say you've got a few clients on board, at what point did you decide to bring a team member on board? And, was it, I got to hire an employee? Was it, I got to outsource it? Was it, I need a partner and you had co founders? At what point do you decide, okay, now I have a
Yeah.
structure?
So when we started the company, it was three of us: me, Rafi, and Tabinda. Tabinda would be handling the operations, and she would also be handling everything in terms of marketing and the strategies and stuff. Rafi, on the other hand, was handling the creative side, and I was handling the production. And after a while, it got a bit overwhelming for us,
Mhm.
because the three of us, we were doing every single job, right? We were also doing sales, we were also doing strategies, we were also doing performance, and like, it wasn't enough, right? And I think that was the right time when we decided that, what, maybe this is something that we should outsource. But my issue with outsourcing was that, uh, anything you don't have control over, right, you should probably not do it. And the reason for that is because if I'm outsourcing my work to someone, right, I have no control over when that person is waking up, what are, their work hours that they're going to spend on my project, or how loyal they will be towards the project that I'm giving to them, okay. When I realized that, okay, you know what, outsourcing is not the thing to be doing, maybe like when I was when I would be considering like a freelancer for a project, right? Maybe that's something, a freelance videographer, by the way, not just a freelance anyone. I think maybe that is something that would work out given that I've seen their body of work. But when you're outsourcing a lot more and more than like what you have control over, right? I've seen this firsthand that I'm unable to explain to a client of mine why something did not work out,
Mm.
right? One, I have no control over the other person who is involved in this project. I have no control over any of their parameters, and not an expert in that. Okay, so what that does is it just allows the client to just say, you know what, fuck these people. All right, I can't trust them. I don't want to give that out as a person. What I want is that if a team is in house, I'm gonna do stuff that I have full control over. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna produce like the best possible quality of that stuff.
Mm.
So the next time someone considers that, hey, maybe I want to like, get a commercial made, or I want to get a branding project done or something, right? They think about me because I'm only focused on one thing. And if I'm focused on one thing for long enough, I know for a fact that, it'll make sense. It'll be good, you know.
That's very fair, but then does that impede the ability to scale up over time?
In the beginning, actually when you're starting out, right, the issue is that every client that you sort of meet, right, uh, if you're not earning the right money from them, it does take away from the ability to scale up. Okay, and when you're running a business, another issue that you face into or you come into is that, let's say you get a client, right, and your first question will be that, if I were to hire another person into my team, right, to just focus on this client, is this client going to stick with me at all? Because there is also that nervousness that you'll have, you know, will this person stay? Because, let's say I onboard a new team member, right? How will I pay their salary when I was reliant on this particular client to fulfill that for me, right? That sort of fear is always there. But I think the fear should end at a certain point, right? The fear should end at a point when you build a good relation with one, okay, and you charge appropriately to that one, okay. The next time that you're building onto someone, right, you give them the whole directive that this is how we're gonna progress, so this is how we're gonna work in the future, okay. You won't have job security or client security if your product is that good, you know.
Mm.
And that's what we learned in the beginning when we were trying to follow the formula that every other company was pushing out, which was that, hey, maybe going viral is the right approach, okay. It was not working out, because I was trying to be like every other company, and it wasn't something that my client needed. It was
Mm.
unfair to them, okay. When I realized the right approach and the right thing that my client needs is someone who can look at them and give them something that's honest and true to them, which is gonna then in turn bring in the revenue that they're looking for, okay. When you're able to provide someone that service, they won't want to leave.
Mm.
And it's as simple as that. Like, if you're doing a good job for someone, right, why would they want to be why would they want to think about getting rid of you?
Very true.
Okay. And it is so obvious. Like, it sounds, it's very simple to just say, like, just do a good job. But honestly, like, if a client is not coming back, or if they're not continuing to work with you, right, there is a reason. One of the things that I realized pretty late was that there's no such thing as a high price,
Mm.
actually. There's no high ticket price. If your service matches the price that you're giving, right, if the quality of your service is that good, they would be willing to pay that price
Mm.
to keep you on board. And once I realized that, I just knew that every form of service that we're going to be putting out, right, has to be of that. When you're talking about scaling up, right, one of the main important factors is considering that if you're going to provide a good service, the person will stick with you. And if they stick with you long enough, right, what you can do is you can try to bring in someone at, let's say, maybe just showing them the ropes, right? Not an intern per se, but someone who's fairly new to it. Okay. And this is just for startups. It's not for like a larger company, obviously. Because I was a startup, so I'm going to give you that example, right? Um, so when you bring in someone like that, and they see that this is how professions handle something, right? Because when they're working with you, right, they're going to be looking at the blueprint that you're leaving out for them. When you leave out enough blueprints, you can start to scale up, actually. So I think for companies that are looking to start up, right, charge the price that is going to be appropriate for the service that you're providing. And when you're charging that, right, the guarantee that the client will stay with you is if your price, right, is basically the same, is the value of service that they're receiving.
Fair.
Yeah.
I think, and you're right. I think clients stick around if you provide them the exact service that they expect from you. If they're going in thinking this is high quality, it's going to be a good deliverable, and I can go back to them because I trust them. And if you give them that, then that should be okay.
Scaling is not an issue, actually. Scaling is easy. It's the trust that is very difficult.
When you give me an example, like let's say you have 50 clients now. How many of those clients were with you since the start? Or let's say, for example, when you do onboard a client, do they give you a retainer that's per month, or is it project by project?
Yeah, so for example, let's say in our line of work, right, we have both. We have a project to project, and we have a retainer. A project to project usually would sustain, like a single project, right, would sustain you for, let's say, 3-4 months.
Oh, so it's big projects.
It's a big project. But the reason for that is because the value that you're providing is just as big, you know. And then we have retainers. When we started out, and we started out with, like, door to door sales, it wasn't something that was working out with us, especially because you have to understand what kind of clients that you want as well, and how you want to position yourself as a company. I think the clients that I have now are the clients that I wanted when I was like starting out, but I just did.
So give me a few examples. What industries do you look at? What kind of companies do you target?
I target companies that, one, which I know I can do a good job for, right? So that means it comes down to tech, it comes down to hospitality, it comes down to corporates. And I'll tell you something. It's when I say corporates, it's very difficult to identify what kind of corporate. One of our clients is a car logistic company. Okay, they import cars from US auctions and they bring them towards UAE and all over the world.
Can I pick up a car?
Yeah,
I might be in the market for a car.
Yeah, you can, but they bring out bulk cars. So the thing is, this is like a proper operational company from Georgia. Okay,
Georgia, Atlanta, or Georgia, the country?
Georgia, the country. Okay. And it's, I would not have thought about them as a client when I was starting out, because I don't know, like, a company like this also exists, and one of the reasons that, like, the reason that I think, like, it's important to have quality of clients rather than quantity of clients.
Of course.
Quantity, obviously, because you can't sustain that much, and if you want to sustain, you have to be on a larger scale, especially if you're a startup, right? It's going to be very difficult. For me, when we started out, we had about 15 clients within a month which were on retainer. Okay, and it was just the three of us. Okay, and it wasn't sustainable for us. But the thing is, when you're starting out, you kind of think, like, I have to, like, stick this out, I have to be like this is the only way. But it took me a while to understand. And one of the major things was that when I made the decision that I would rather just have one client than have 15 that I can't handle. When I decided that that one client was paying enough for 5 of those clients, Then I scaled up a little bit and I had two clients, and those two clients were paying same as those 15, and I realized this allows me to provide better service to these two. Okay, I don't need to have 15,
Very true.
right? I
Also, running 15 clients on retainer with three people sounds
it,
like hell.
it was I was getting no sleep, you know, and I wasn't exactly happy with myself, and I wasn't happy with the idea that, is this gonna be my life forever? Because that means I'm having no weekend. I'm not having a life outside work. Okay,
Mhm.
and the friends that I have outside work are the friends who I have in work. But I think realizing that the most important thing is that there's never going to be an issue with finding clients. Okay, today we have Cabby Taxi as a client. You know about Cabby Taxi?
No, I don't.
This It's one of the RTA taxi companies
Okay.
called KABI Cabby.
What's different about them?
So I don't know if you know this, but basically, there are five taxi companies.
Okay.
Okay, they fall under Hala Taxi, all of them, and they're basically Warrior Taxi, Khalil Taxi, and Dubai Taxi and Cabby Taxi.
Okay.
It's the same taxi company, but they're all part of the government's RTA program.
Yeah, Dubai Taxi Corporation.
Yes, exactly. But they all come under the same umbrella, but they're managed by different teams.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. Now, Cabby Taxi is the client that I would not have imagined to get, right? Had I given up in that first year when I had these 15 clients. I would not have imagined that, okay, you know what, maybe this would be in the cards for me. But I think keeping at it, no matter how difficult it was, is the reason how I'm here. And there were a lot of companies that started out with us, by the way. A lot of companies which don't exist today,
Mm.
you know, because at the time, as you were mentioning earlier, in 2020 and 2021, we had companies that were just starting out. So K9 Unit, for example, right? They were pioneers in TikTok marketing
Mhm.
because this happened right after COVID, or I think around COVID. Uh, and follow people looking at what they were doing, right? Wanted to follow into that same, footsteps or whatever, they were trying to build, right? But they could not sustain that, these other companies. And even the companies that started out with us could not sustain that. Okay. Uh, and for some reason, Alhamdulillah, for some reason, we just managed to sustain the first 2 years. Once those first 2 years were done, I just knew what I wanted to do. I knew, like, there is value in the work that I'm making or providing. There's a different level of gratification when someone looks at a product that you made, okay, and they just they feel really happy that, okay, you know what, their brand is getting this. It's a different level of gratification because now something that came from your brain is, you know like, it's a proud moment for a different company. So there's a company called Nusa. It's a
Mhm.
real estate company, and when they started out, they were also, they were a startup. Okay, so the person, the founder, he's a very good friend of mine. His name is Josh. He wanted to basically have something that is not very gimmicky the way these other real estate agencies have, where it's just, corporate handshakes being done in, like, commercial
Mhm.
video for them. He wanted something to have real feel. So he asked a friend of his, to act in the video, and he asked, him to also, like, integrate his family element into this. So when he pitched me the idea, he wasn't expecting it to be what it became, actually, like the story that we were going to tell with that. And I think in a very short, small budget, the story that we did tell is something that, it became an asset. It became a foundation. So when a client in real estate comes towards me and asks me, like, can we have a commercial for some, I show them what I've made, something that I'm proud of. But the thing is, when I showed that video to Josh, right, And when I saw the emotional reaction to that, I don't think there was a level of gratification that I could feel above that, right?
Interesting.
Because, it came from my brain. No one could teach me that.
Mm.
I didn't go to film school. I didn't go to like, uh, any. I didn't learn design. I didn't learn how to tell a story. Nobody can teach you those things. But when something that came out of my brain, right, and out of like, just the idea of fucking around and finding out, right, and I'm showing this to a person that, hey, look, I made this for you, right? I think that level of like, appreciation or gratification, it's unbeatable, it's unmatched. Okay.
Then, as a pure, because that sounds incredible, right? For something that you made to be received so successfully,
Yeah.
probably makes that experience all the more enriching.
Even if it's not just by clients, right? Even one of the things is that, so the people that I surround myself with, I they'll tell me when I'm like, full of
They'll keep
myself,
you
like,
in
yeah,
check.
yeah, yeah, they'll keep me in check, like, they'll be like, dude, you're full of shit, like, this is not working out, okay? And they're real with me. Like, even the team that we have at Milkshake, they're real with me. They tell me like, dude, like, I think this is like probably the shittiest thing that you've made, okay? But even just them having a moment to just appreciate what I've made, right? um that is also the level of gratification that I know that, okay, you know what, I'm on the right path. Okay. Because it isn't just about doing something that will look good to your client. It is also something that, if your team looks at it and they ask themselves that, damn, like, we've really grown up, we've really, like, leveled up our shit, we our strategies, our quality of product is just incredible now. When your team realizes that, right, and they see that, there is a difference in how you were before versus how you are now, right, it just keeps them motivated as well.
How do you then, as someone who's so creative, how do you then almost train the people you bring in? Because, for example, you go from 3 to 6, maybe you go to 12, maybe you go to
Yeah.
20, right? So, would you then envision yourself sitting down and training the people you bring in because there is that Shayan quality that
Yeah.
people are used to? Or would you then say, listen, you watch and you learn, you look at what I'm doing and you learn, as opposed to hands-on training them?
I So the guys that I'm working with now, right? Um, the thing is, it's something that you can't train. For example, like, you can't train someone how to tell a good story. You know, you can tell them that what makes a bad story.
Hmm.
Okay. I think one of the things that I do now, right? And I'll be honest, you allow people to have creative freedom even in your team, like, people who are not in the creative like aspect. So our our director of operations, Mustafa, okay, it's not his job to design something, it's not his job to direct or tell a creative story. Okay. But on the times that when I can't actually be involved, right, and I ask him to step in, right, I think his writing is probably just as good, you know, when he's telling a story about how certain things are going to flow, or, when he's putting forward, like, campaign plans and stuff, right? I think when you put someone in an environment where it's nurturing and you're surrounded by people who are completely full of energy and they have those ideas, right, things work out. Mustafa did not come from a background where he also learned film or any of that. And when he was working with us, he was working specifically in operations. But today I consider Mustafa to be part of like this hive mind that just has a lot of these cool ideas. I think to be creative, you just have to live life.
Hmm.
So a lot of these ads that we created for for accessibilities, a lot of this came from experiences that he lived through or things that he has seen. And I think that was the point of Milkshake in the first place, that we want to tell stories about stuff that we see or things that surround us. The only difference here is that if you are starting out, or if you're a small company and you're growing, like for example we're growing right now, right? The one thing that we do is we always do quality checks, right? So for example, like if a script is finally made, right, and a team member shows me that script, if I can envision it and I think it's working, if the story beats are like properly working, go ahead with it. you know
Mm,
make it, do a good job, because at the end of the day I wanted a space for you to tell a good story. you know
true,
and if I'm able to provide you that, I'm happy. But just do a good job.
true. You give them that faith and you let them run with it.
Yeah, I do have, like, there is this whole Heisenberg effect. Like, I will check. Obviously it's very hard for me to delegate,
I
very
can
very
tell.
hard. Okay, but I think now that I've started to do it, it there is no other way to grow if you're not going to
I
delegate.
think also as soon as you start delegating, it frees you up for all the things you thought were not important,
Yeah.
and and those little aspects will help you grow as
Yeah.
well. Like for example, with the year ending now, do you then have a process, because you've run this now for 4.5 years, right?
Yeah, 4.5 years
Yeah.
now.
Do you have a process now where you say, okay, the year's ending, I want to recap, I want to celebrate what we've done so far, take a moment to appreciate my team, and then maybe I want to set down flags for next year. I need these things to happen, and I aim to get there by doing one, two, and three.
Yeah, I think maybe this year is when we did that. Okay, because I would say that yes, every year there was a year of growth, because every year I realized that I didn't know shit the year before.
Mm.
Okay, because for example, when I started out, right, I thought I knew everything there was to know about the business. Second year came and I realized, dude, like that guy was like, get a load of that guy. And then the third year came, and then that third year I realized, dude, like I was blinded like completely in the first 2 years. Then the fourth year came, and this was this has been almost, I think the fourth year is over. I think we're stepping into our fifth year. Uh, but each year I'm always excited about being able to say, man, that guy was full of shit. I know what I'm doing now.
Mm.
you know there is a vision that I have. Actually, my vision is that there are people and there are companies that I look up to, and I want to be the best at what I'm doing. It sounds like it's a reach, but truly, 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 I want to be the best. I want to be the best in terms of creativity. I want to be the best in terms of delivering a product that my clients can look at and be proud that it's a part of their company, it's a part of their brand. And the only other personal goal that I have for 2026 is trying to tell my own stories. The reason why I started this whole thing was because I wanted to tell stories that I thought were important. But because when you're running a business, the hardest thing is making content for yourself. But the best thing that you can do is make content for yourself.
Mm.
You know, I think some of our biggest clients came because I made content for Milkshake and I made content for myself.
Give me a glimpse of what those stories look like.
For my own stories, okay. So for example, let's say there's a story that I'm working on currently. It is a story of a Qawwali
Mhm.
uh, by Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. Okay, it's a very famous Qawwali called Sanson Ki Mala. I don't know if you know about it. Okay,
I don't, but I know this
okay,
was for Ali
yeah.
Khan.
So basically, it was written in the 16th century
Mhm.
by this lady called Mirabai. Okay,
Okay.
and she wrote it as part of her devotion to her god. Okay, around. And then the partition happened between India and Pakistan, and this got lost in time. And then it was found in Pakistan by Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. The idea of that poem, right, was about how if you love someone strongly enough that you become one with that person, one with that entity. The reason that it intrigued me was because I was have my friend who had an estranged relation with a family member of his, right? And he was telling me, like, how can I forget this person in my life? Because this guy, he wasn't just like a father figure. He wasn't just like an elder brother figure. He was a part of me. And then he told me the story of this really old tale of this guy called Mansur al-Hallaj from the time of the Abbasid Caliphate. Okay.
Mhm.
And Mansur was roaming around shops. He was like a Sufi person, but then he kind of like lost it somewhere over there. Okay. He was saying "An al haq." It's an Arabic sentence for saying "I am the truth." The people did not like what he was saying. They were saying that he's being blasphemous or whatever. So they complained to the king that of the time that Mansur is being openly blasphemous, and they sentenced him to death. A lot of people had debate, like, they should not have done that. uh, and my idea was that centuries later, right, a lady writes a poem about a different god, not a god from Islam, but a god from Hinduism. Okay. And her idea is the same, like, one of the words is that, like, I'll translate it for you in English. It's she was so devoted in the love that she had, right, that she became one as a figure with the person that she loved and the person that she was. And I thought about what Mansoor was going through, maybe, like maybe he loved God so much that he kind of became one with that. And I thought that maybe that is the only way to to give love to people, or to have love in your life. If you love someone so strongly that you don't know where you begin or where they end. And I wanted to make something that communicated this concept.
I just had goosebumps.
Okay. Nice.
No, wow. For
Yeah.
you to relate that story of Mansur in the
I'm
Abbasid
trying.
Empire, no, that's incredible. I would watch that. I really would. It's fascinating because I think there's a few people in our world like you, like yourself, who are inspired by great stories that are lost in our times. And the connections you make, like the one you just made, that's something you could sit down and genuinely talk about.
Yeah, but I would say, I'm trying to get out of this whole corporate cycle. Okay. And this is just like one of the stories that I'm working on very recently, actually. There are plenty of stories that deserve to be told. And these aren't stories that are my stories, but stories that I've witnessed. And these stories deserve to be told, one, because, a good story is something that leaves the other person with something, like gives them like a wake up call, or a reason to, like, keep holding on to something, for example. Okay. I it it is the reason why the escapism element is so important in our lives. you know because if you don't have something that is going to keep you hooked or entertained, right, there is no other reason why you might want to continue. And I was thinking, like, before the medium of film, or before the medium of videos was there, right, there was a different way of telling stories. Like, if you go back, like, towards 17th century, for example, there were plays. And these plays, they had something about, let's say, like, a Shakespearean play would tell you something about greed. They tell you about honor. It tell you about, like, the price that you'd have to pay for greatness. Okay. You go back further, you'd have stories that were being told through kaleidoscopes, for example, by a street merchant. The thing is, this is something that just, or it just gets recorded in a book, the
True.
oldest form of story.
I wanted to give you an example exactly on this. We spoke to someone at my firm. We spoke to someone who is the co-creator of Angry Birds from China.
Shit.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Incredible guy, by the way. Fascinating, fascinating dude. Had dinner with him, and he had been everywhere. By the way, he was the first. He was the first non-American. No, he was the youngest first non-American to list on the Nasdaq, because he listed one version of his company through Angry Birds eventually on Nasdaq. Incredible guy. He got picked up by a Saudi company to, which might not be completely public information right now, to go build games in Saudi. And his first idea was, hey, before anything, before the AAA rated game and the distribution and the contracts I need to sign, let me write a story down. And let me find people who will back the story. Because at the end of the day, if you're building out, for example, indie films or films that you believe have soul and purpose but will not have immediate backing, then you have to have something that'll resonate with people.
Yeah.
And so you focus the most you can on the story at first.
Yeah, 100%. Then, as I was mentioning earlier, that you need to build a body of work for someone to be wanting to invest in you. And if any person wants to start out, right, they need to have a body of work for a client to come in. They need to have a body of work for investment to come in, and body of work to, like, tell themselves that there is value in them as a person or as a creator or as a founder or something.
True.
Body work is important. And as far as stories go, I was just mentioning to you earlier that uh as you mentioned, there are 70 episodes that you guys did, right? Those are 70 valuable stories, right? 70 different lives that people have lived, you know uh, and they, each of them deserve to be like heard by someone, someone like me, for example, someone who is probably starting out, someone who's midway through their journey. There is importance in the work of Marcus Aurelius, for example. Okay, you learn a lot from a man who's made a lot of mistakes, right? The most wisdom comes from that man. um, that's why it's important for us to, make sure the body of work that we're putting out, right, is valuable. And even if I'm going to be making a movie or something, right, it had like the whole conversation that I'm trying to have with you is about something like putting forward something that has an impact or has a value that can impact another person's life, right? For better, for sure, but like in certain ways that it can speak to someone, and maybe even give them a wake up call for something. And
Fair.
yeah,
Do you have a tagline at Milkshake Studios? Something you guys strive to achieve or live by?
we have a tagline which says, we bet you haven't tried this flavor.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's new. That's interesting. Yeah. And I think maybe perhaps that's what there is to look forward to, right?
Yeah,
New stuff coming out from you guys.
for sure. Yes.
And deeper, longer, proper films. Hopefully.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Praying. Fingers crossed.
Inshallah. I think you'll definitely make stuff that's impactful, and I'd love to see it when you
I
do.
would try.
100%. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
This was an
Thank you so
absolute
much.
pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.